play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Live from Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Radio, Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Thanks so much for joining, whether you're listening live over the air on 96.5 FM The Answer in Little Rock area, Central Arkansas, or if you're listening online anywhere in the world via the stream at 96.5fmtheanswer.com, or if you're listening delayed by podcast or on Krypton Radio. I'm so glad you're listening. Always so glad to have you join us on this geeky journey into the things we love. As I said, I'm Shane Stacks. This is the reason I call it Shane Plays. It's not just about games. This is when I play. This is when I geek out. Now, I'm an adult. I got responsibilities. This is the time of the week where I just get to geek out. So come along and play with me. If you're asking, can Shane come outside and play? The answer is yes, at least for the next hour. Don't forget, this is live radio. Live talk radio. So it's just like political radio or sports radio or religious radio, whatever, but it's geek radio. So you can call in if you want, 501-823-0965. That's 501-823-0965. Or you can tweet me at Shane Plays. That's ShanePlays. And I do try to monitor that and respond on the air. Speaking of Shane Plays, ShanePlays.com. I always have show notes up during the live show and for the podcast version. You can go to shaneplays.com and there's show notes for today's show up right now. So if you want to know more about my guest and what they're doing and that sort of thing, then there's helpful links right there. And I will introduce my guests here in a moment. Got some cool folks on from a fantasy novel universe from Ed Greenwood. And if you're listening to the show and you don't know who Ed Greenwood is, you want to go take a Geek 101 course, but I'll tell you, he is the driving force behind the Forgotten Realms, which is the most famous and widely used of the D&D campaign settings and has a whole novel ecosystem around it and all that. So Elminster himself. Last week's show is archived on the blog, and in the podcast had Michael Brown on, and we went over geek news and ranted on Entertainment Weekly's most powerful superheroes list. That was a lot of fun. Don't forget the show does go out as a podcast on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and other fine podcast directories. And last but not least, Shane Plays is carried on Krypton Radio. KryptonRadio.com is SciFi for your Wi-Fi, and we're rebroadcast a week delayed on Saturdays and Mondays on Krypton Radio. Go check out the schedule page over there at KryptonRadio.com. Okay, having said that, I'm about to introduce my guests, but Zach, I'm looking at the website for the theater right now. Next Friday, baby, we can at 12:30 or 3:45. We can try to roll up into Rogue One. Zach's my producer for those of it. We were trying to figure out when. I can't go see it Thursday because I work late that night. So anyway, all right, I'm going to introduce my guest. See who all I have here. From Stormtalons, which is part of the Ed Greenwood group, which is also this publishing initiative called Andre Librum, I believe I pronounced that right. And like I said, it's got Ed Greenwood's stamp of approval, and he writes for this stuff too. You may remember several months back we had Ed and Gregory A. Wilson, aka Arvin Elleron, and some other folks on to talk about Hellmaw, which was a universe within the Ed Greenwood group. Well, and at the time they were talking about Pony Island Adventures, which was the code word for a fantasy setting. Well, the fantasy setting is out now. The books have started releasing. Ed put the first one out, and we've got some other novels. And it's Stormtalons, which is a fantasy novel universe, and just other cool stuff going on. So on the phone, we got two people by regular phone, and I have one person by Skype from London. Let me see who I have here. Do I have, welcoming back to the show, no stranger to the show, Gregory A. Wilson, a.k.a. Arvin Elleron.
Hey, Shane, how are you?
Hey, man. Great to hear your voice. For those of y'all that don't know, Arv is not only a fantasy author, but he's also a frontman and trumpet player for a progressive rock band. And he's a Twitch streamer. Not only does he Twitch his own stuff, but he also Twitches storytelling game sessions for Good Old Games. So, Arv, welcome back to the show. I have one quick question for you.
Okay.
Did you ever get Dishonored 2 working?
Yeah, I finally did. All I had to do was buy a whole new graphics card.
Oh, my goodness. That was a night. That was fun.
It was a night, yeah. I finally got it working. It's just been a matter of time to get back to it, but I am going to get back to it because story, right? I mean, I love the world, and the world building is amazing in there. So it's good stuff.
Yeah, that was a fun night. So I think you ended up falling back to Tyranny that night, if I remember right. So
yeah, that's right. I ended up doing that, which works right out of the box. Just saying, Arcane.
What the heck, you know?
Saying.
Yeah. All right. So well, good to know. I also have, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing this right. So if I mispronounce it, it's not on purpose. I believe I have a Dileep S. Rangan. Is that correct, Dileep?
Hey, Shane. Yes. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thanks for joining us via Skype from London. We're intercontinental today. And Gregory and Dileep are both authors for the Stormtalons universe. And I think they've also both written for Helmaw that we talked about before. So we'll talk about your books today. And then finally, I believe that I have Cat Jarrett, who is the lore guardian for the Stormtalons universe. Cat, are you with us?
I am. Thank you for having us.
Yay! So glad you're on. And I'm looking forward to talking to all three of you about what Stormtalons is and, the vision for it and what makes it unique as a fantasy setting and what a lore guardian does and all that. I do want to say Salman, who I've been working with from the Ed Greenwood group, who helped set this up, and also the Helmaw appearance several months back, and then Marie offered some giveaways. So I'm not going to give them away today live on the show because I have people who listen by podcast and then also delayed on Krypton Radio. So what I'm going to do is I'll mention this a couple of times during the show. People can email me at shaneplays.com. That's SHANE at shaneplays.com, or tweet me at shaneplays and let me know your interest. And I have 3 sets of 4 digital Stormtalons books to give away. So just want to throw that out there. Email me at shaneplays.com or tweet me at shaneplays. And I've got 3 of those, if I remember right. And each one of those kits has 4 digital Stormtalons books. And I'm pretty sure that 2 of those books are Gregory and Dileep's. So that's neat stuff. Okay. Greg, as you know, I normally do a news segment. I'm not going to do that today because since we have 3 people, I want to make sure to give everyone plenty of time to talk. However, I did have a news item I wanted to mention, and I'm not even going to play the news sound. We're just going to have kind of a moment of silence for this. There's a good chance that everybody on this call will know who I'm talking about, but I would be shocked if Gregory did not. And that is Joe Deaver, who is the author of the Lone Wolf game books, who has passed away. Yeah. So I imagine you know about that, Greg.
Yeah, I actually had a moment of silence for him myself. I actually met Joe at Gen Con a couple years ago. And obviously, since I do the Fighting Fantasy game books on my stream, and I did some of the Lone Wolf stuff when I was younger, and I have some of the Lone Wolf stuff, that's sad. I mean, Joe had a real impact on a lot of people in the industry, and concealed this, and people outside of his family did not know about this is sort of a long-term illness. So, that was unfortunate. And he did a lot of stuff to bring things to the video game world as well in terms of getting his work out. So, that was sad news.
Yeah.
And just continuing, what a spectacular year 2016 is.
Yeah, 2016 just keeps bringing it to us. So, Joe Deaver's books were the first time I picked up one of his Lone Wolf books. I was like, my head explode. What? It's like role playing. It's combining role playing and reading fiction, fantasy fiction. What? So it was like the book was your game master. It wasn't just a choose your own adventure. It was much more advanced than that. And in fact, as you went through the series, your character would level up and you would get magical items that you could take to further books and stuff like that. So, and then of course there was Fighting Fantasy, which is huge. So just want to give a moment of silence. And before I do that, Dileep or Kat, were either of y'all, fans of Joe's work?
I have read it, although it's been a while, and he did help a lot with helping me with my writing, actually.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's great. Yeah, I think he's one of those people that it's like everybody knows and was impacted by, that's in like the role-playing game kind of fantasy area, but for some reason it doesn't get talked about as often as he might have. Dileep,
Right.
were you familiar with Joe at all? And if you weren't, that's fine. I'm just kind of curious.
No, I'd read some of the work, but I don't think I had a sense of the scope of what he had done
Yeah.
or the impact he's having.
Yeah.
And it goes to say how much that these very prominent figures actually don't get necessarily the recognition they deserve when
Right.
they're doing things outside the community of, gamers or that
Right.
particular genre.
Well, he evidently really loved his stuff, and he was pretty hardcore on his world building. Like, there's people who aren't even into like role-playing games that kind of laud his books as to the richness of the world building and that sort of thing that he did. Okay, well, I'm just gonna, and like, this is supposedly a no-no in radio, but I don't care. I'm gonna have some radio silence real quick for Joe, and then we'll move on with the show. Okay, and that moment of silence was for Joe Deaver, the author of the Lone Wolf game books, which were beloved and by many and impacted by many. Okay, so we're gonna move on with the show. Thank you all for that. While we observe Joe there, I also want to give a shout out to listener and Patreon supporter Garen Gillum. He threw a Twitter out, said, "Hey Shane, I'm getting to listen live for the first time from Washington D.C." So Garen, thanks for listening and appreciate your support. And Garen, by the way, after the show today, I'm running Star Trek Adventures over at Game Goblins. I'm going to run the playtest. Garen, for my guest today, Garen is a longtime listener and supporter of the show, and he's like, "Hey man, you need to talk to Modifius Entertainment about their Star Trek Adventures role-playing game." And I reached out to Modifius and had a great show with them. So, and now I'm running a playtest for their game. But anyway, moving on, let's talk about Stormtalons. So, I guess, Kat, since you're the lore guardian, if you will, for Stormtalons, why don't you introduce us to what Stormtalons is? And then once we do that, we'll get a chance to talk to Greg and Dileep about their books.
Stormtalons is a rich, epic tapestry fantasy world that Ed Greenwood has come up with and is letting all of us play in. And it's not the Forgotten Realms. It's low magic, although magic, of course, exists. A lot of politics involved, very character-driven stories. We don't want the focus of the novels to be this incredibly powerful artifact or this incredibly evil foe that has to be vanquished. We want the stories about people who are living in this world and their trials and tribulations and their struggles and how the surroundings and their environment impacts them.
Okay, well, very cool. So when you say it's low magic, is it still considered a quote unquote high fantasy setting, or is it like, how would you describe the scope of the setting? Is it? I mean, are we talking? It's more like street level urban, or is it more epic, like Tolkien, or?
There's still a lot of magic in the world, but it's controlled through two main methods, and one is the Hierophar. The Hierophar is the ruler of a country called Skalant, and he is the only archwizard in the entire setting right now. And he is very, you could say, jealous or protective, depending on your perspective, of magic. And so anytime someone comes up with a high gift or a very powerful gift or a very powerful magic item, he sends people there, his Smite Serpent bands, to capture them, and then they are given a choice: serve the Hierophar or die. And there's no chance to think about it. They don't get a chance to go and talk to their family about it. They have to make the decision on the spot. And if they choose to serve the Hierophar, they don't get to go back to their normal life. They are swept away to Skalant for whatever nefarious purposes there, or they're killed.
And so Skalant, I just want to make sure, Skalant is sort of a region or a nation. It's not the world as a whole?
Correct. It's a country within the world of Asmer.
Okay. Asmer. Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And the other method of control is the Stormtalons themselves, which are these mists that are in Asmer And the mists themselves are very, very dangerous, but what's more dangerous is what lives inside them. And it's said in Asmer, excuse me, that only the foolish or the desperate dare forge the mists because they are just so dangerous. And they are also magic dampening. Nobody knows how to control them, not the gods, not the dragons, not the Hierophar. And there's pockets where people live, and those pockets can be thousands of miles or they can be a couple of inches. So those are the two main ways that we kind of keep magic as a tool to be used, but not the focus to be used.
Okay. So what magic there is it, and I'm just trying to give people an idea of, the feel of the setting. Mm-hmm. Is it a more traditional, I have spells and spell books type magic, or is it a kind of a wild magic that people just innately can use? Or is it more like what Patrick Rothfuss did, where he came up with, I forget what it's called, but his main magic that people go to school to learn is almost like engineering. Is it, what kind of magic is it?
Right now, and of course it's an ongoing world. So,
right.
All of this could be developed into other things. But right now it is more of a traditional, you learn the spells, you cast the spells. You have components and gestures and certain words that you say, and that's how the magic comes about. What's unique about the Stormtalons magic is it's all controlled by the gift. Someone has to have the gift of casting in order to cast spells. And anybody can cast any spell as long as they have the gift. So you have a first-level wizard, and they could cast, rain of heavenly fire from the skies to smite all of their enemies. What the problem is every spell has a cost, and the cost is different. So, yes, this first-level wizard could cast that spell if he knows it, but it would probably consume him with fire on the spot.
Right.
Because his gift isn't powerful enough to help belay that cost.
Okay. That's cool. So I want to pause for a moment, and I want to ask Gregory and Dileep, are your main characters in your novels, which we'll talk about here in a moment, do they use magic, or are they sort of like caught in a magical world and, navigating a magical world? And I guess I'll start with Gregory.
Grayshade as a assassin does use magic, but it's very limited. It's sort of magic that's not likely to attract the attention of the Hierophar, and it's limited to, it's sort of driven by his profession. So he uses a kind of magic called sound shifting, which essentially allows him to change the way that sound is perceived by others. He knocks on the wooden wall next to him, and the patrolling guard hears it behind him 150 feet away,
Okay.
Or he, has a particular kind of magical device called a chick-chack that he can set one of those stones near this area. If it gets kicked by a passing guard or some other kind of enemy, Grayshade will hear the sister chick-chack, the sort of paired one, by himself will vibrate also. So it's subtle stuff like that. It's limited by not only the requirements of the Hierophar, but by his own profession. Obviously, flashy, super powerful, impressive magic is not going to be useful in a field where you're trying to be subtle and stealthy and quiet. So he does use magic on a very limited basis, but it's magic that is suited to his profession and fits also within the larger world of Asmer and Grayshade's own home city of Corel.
Okay, and so so your protagonist has quote unquote the gift and can use magic. Theoretically,
yeah.
Okay.
Although interestingly, he's not aware of it being a gift one way or the other.
I see.
But that's clearly what it is. I mean, he just isn't conscious of it as such, and he does not use it much except in, as I say, these limited circumstances.
All right, and we'll get more to your book later in the show, but Grayshade is a morally complex character, if from what I understand from the description of your book. Yeah,
that's putting it mildly.
Okay, I want to. How about you, Dileep? Now, your protagonist is a pirate. Is that correct, Dileep?
Yeah. So she's the captain of a privateer. So in Jaya Sadera, which is a continent separated from the main kingdoms of Asmer by the mists, privateering is kind of become the way of doing business. So they left piracy, so they are officially sanctioned to go and hunt down ships who haven't bought flags of protection from the island kingdoms who run the privateering. So it's a bit of a racket.
Sounds like it.
On. And,
yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of what was going on in, the late 19th century throughout the Mediterranean, right? It's based on that kind of culture. But my protagonist, the captain, she herself doesn't have the gift, and she's more a character in a world of magic and occasionally uses magical devices. In J.S. Adera, there aren't a lot of people with the gift themselves,
right?
But they can create devices using rune stones, which are in greater abundance in that area.
It sounds fun. So yeah, this is sounding like a really fun setting and very different types of characters. Now I know that Ed Greenwood published the first book, and then I think Gregory, your book was the second, and I guess Dileep, your book is the third. When we come back, I've got to get a break in. It is live radio, but when we come back, Kat, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the setting of Stormtalons? I want to hear about what Ed's book was about, and then we'll talk with Gregory and Dileep more in length about their books, and also how people can get these Stormtalons books. So, which are again from the Ed Greenwood group, springing from the fertile, imaginative mind of Ed Greenwood, Elminster himself. When we come back on Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
Megawars.net. The classic online space strategy game has returned, bigger and better than ever before. Scout the universe and claim your empire. Construct, customize, and launch dozens of different starships. Battle thousands of opponents online in a team-based competition leading to the ultimate Battle of the Galaxies. Grab your slot today for the only online game where tactics and strategy still reign supreme. Visit Megawars.net and get options only available in our special pre-sales previews running now. Megawars.net.
The die is cast. Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions. Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/Shane Plays.
Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio, a journey into the things we love. I am joined by ambassadors, if you will, of the Stormtalons fantasy novel universe, springing from the fertile and sometimes fevered imagination of Ed Greenwood, Elminster himself, joined by Cat Jarrett, who's the lore guardian for the universe, and also by authors Gregory A. Wilson and Dileep Rangan. So before we back to talking to them about Stormtalons, got a tweet from, and I am gonna mess this name up. I am sorry going ahead. It's looks like Xavier Texaberry. It says, hello from a fellow, the Ed Greenwood Group pub author, listening from Mexico City. Kudos to all of you guys. Well done. So, are y'all familiar with who I'm shouting out to here?
It sounds familiar.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So who is this cat? Who is this?
He is Xavier, and he is one of our amazing authors that you will be seeing soon, hopefully, in Stormtalons with one of his novels.
Okay, so he does have a Stormtalons, not Hellmaw, so he's Stormtalons.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right. Well, Xavier, thanks so much for shouting out. Maybe we can talk to you in the future. And I know that Marie had mentioned there was another Stormtalons author named Richard that we didn't have room to get on today, but you never know, in the future maybe we can have him on as well. So I want to get to Gregory and Dileep's books, but before we do that, Kat, why don't you just flesh out just a little bit more on what the Stormtalons universe is, why it is, what motivated Ed Greenwood to say, I want to do, what's unique about it? Why did he want to do this universe? And also tell us a little bit about the first book in Stormtalons that Ed himself wrote.
The main reason Stormtalons came about is the fantasy fans are a lot more sophisticated than they were 10, 15, 20, 30, however many years
Yeah, they
ago.
all wear monocles now.
I know, it's very sophisticated and civilized now. But he wanted to come up with a whole new setting that would reflect that and give them what they're looking for with a more sophisticated brand of storytelling. And, in most fantasy, you have, okay, that's an orc, so that's a bad guy.
Right.
Okay, you have a high elf, so that's a good guy. Well, there's none of that in Stormtalons. Every race is treated as a whole race, like the human race. So you have elves, and they live in the mists, and they have these incredible abilities that having to do with the Stormtalons themselves. But some of them are good, some of them are bad, some of them are completely indifferent. There are no evil races. There are no good races. It's all about individuals and groups.
Okay.
So that's one of the big reasons.
Okay, so it's not just the every 5 years the orcs unite under a leader and threaten the human frontier kind of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
The only quote-unquote bad guys that you would really find are they're called the Twisted. And I talked to you a little bit about the mists and how dangerous they are. And one of the things that they can do is they can warp a living creature that it touches and turn them into a monster. And sometimes it's very physical and sometimes it's very mental. So they look the same, but their minds are hideously affected. And so those are generally the quote-unquote bad guys because most of them are completely insane.
Okay. So are they just kind of running around being crazy, or are they unified in some way, or?
There's absolutely no unification in it.
Okay.
Even that's one of the areas that's open for development. Stormtalons is very much growing still. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the things that people are asking, it's like we haven't built that yet. And it's really exciting to be a part of that. Imagine getting in and Forgotten Realms.
Right at the beginning. Right.
Yeah, right at the beginning.
Now, am I correct that they're just like Hellmaw, Stormtalons is going to end up being like 120 like different publications overall, I think, including like maybe graphic novels and that sort of thing?
Yes, right now we have the first 5 years of it mapped out.
Okay.
11 novels minimum a year, plus short stories, graphic novels, gaming materials, novellas. It's going to be busy.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Okay, so tell us a little bit about what was in Ed's book, Ed Greenwood, of course, Elminster himself, that kicked this whole thing off?
The biggest thing, it's called Words of Unbinding, and there are several places that you can find it. It's on all major ebook retailers, and you can go to onderlibrum.com and find it there. And what Words of Unbinding is about is it really establishes the world as this gritty, realistic, not, it's not Tolkien at all. It's not these flights of fancy with, you have the good guys over there floating around and casting good magic and being wise, and you have the bad guys over there and they're sitting on their thrones. And no, you have Lontel, the Red Cloak, who lives in the cesspit of a city known as Tantalus. And you have her apprentice named Dustra. And for some reason, the Hierophar is after Lontel. And there seems to be some history between the actual individual, Lontel the Red Cloak, and the Hierophar. And over the course of the adventure, you're trying to figure out what's going on with that. Why does the Hierophar want this individual so much? She's never evinced any kind of high magic. And Dustra the street rat, having to cope with the fact that now her mentor is not there anymore, and now she's on the streets, and the Hierophar is also after her, so she goes on the run. And so she has the only thing that she has is what Lontel has given her to survive, and that's advice, wisdom, and an artifact that she has no idea what to do with.
Okay, so Ed kind of introduces things introduces the feel of the universe, but also, shows it from the perspective of maybe not, it's not Aragorn running around. So it's, it's more street level, to see how, it sounds like he's showing how the quote unquote average person who may become non-average later, exists in this universe, if I understood that correctly. So one final question, and then I'm going to kind of, try to talk with Gregory and Dileep about their books. What is your role, Kat, as a lore guardian, and how did you end up as a lore guardian?
The lore guardians, and each setting of the Ed Greenwood group has one. What the lore guardians do is we are in charge of making sure we do regular editorial things, making sure the manuscripts are on time and helping the authors out if they need something from the setting, and going over the manuscripts. But our biggest role, and why we're called the lore guardians, is we're the ones that keep track of all of the lore that is coming up with these brand new settings. We're the ones that have to maintain continuity. We're the ones that when someone comes into Stormtalons and says, I want to make a flying dragon god that can fling lightning bolts from its eyes and with every sweep of its tail can decimate mountains, we have to say no. Because
as cool as that would be,
well, we really pushed for it. We really tried.
I'm telling you guys cut me no slack.
Well, look, my character can bench press moons. So, all right. Well, it reminds me, and I'm not beating on anyone's setting off. Every setting has challenges when you have multiple people involved. But, I'm a big Dragonlance nerd. Mm-hmm. And as Dragonlance kept going and more authors got involved, there used to be these famous arguments because, there was this city of Naraka that was like the evil city. And it geographically would be in different places in different books because for whatever reason, nobody caught that. So there would be these huge arguments back on, remember Usenet? Do y'all remember Usenet, use groups? There would be these massive arguments over, where is Naraka? So it's kind of, shepherding the continuity and making sure everything, fits together, I guess. So kind of like, if at Marvel or DC Comics, if something happens to a villain in the Batman books, then that needs to reflect if that same villain shows up in the Superman books or whatever. So I guess maybe that's a good explanation.
It is, And we don't want to go through the whole Green Lantern. Well, okay, yellow doesn't affect him anymore.
Right.
We want to catch that stuff right off the bat. Is yes, that's a good idea. Let's do that. Or this is going to cause problems later on. Or
Right.
whatever.
Yeah, not just throughout this massive thing that chips away at the foundations just because it was a neat idea for 1 second. Okay.
Exactly.
So, Cat, fascinating. Wish I could talk more about that, but we time is a predator that stalks us all our lives, and live radio is always a great example of that. I want to move forward and talk to a couple of the authors here, but all three of you can feel free to chime in at any time. If I don't want you to feel like that you just have to sit there. If you have something to add to any part of the discussion, feel free. I should have mentioned that towards the beginning of the show. Gregory, Dileep, do either of y'all want to go first or second? You just let me know, and we'll talk about your books in turn.
That's up. Doesn't matter to me.
All right. Well, Gregory spoke up first, so we'll go with Gregory. We'll make it easy. All right. So, Gregory Wilson, a.k.a. Arvin Elleron, tell us about Grayshade. And before you tell us about the book, I have one question that literally millions of people around the world are waiting with bated breath to know. I have to ask you this right now.
Okay.
Are there any Arlex?
No, this is a separate world from that. Yeah, Shane knows about this from my first novel, The Third Sign. But
I love Arlex.
Although that series will be returned to at some point, that is not part of the Stormtalons world. So no Arlex as such.
Okay, Arlex are from another world, and I know we're here to talk about Stormtalons. Are sort of like a mesh of Klingons and Minotaurs, and I love them deeply.
Yeah, but I appreciate the callback, though.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so tell us a little bit about Grayshade. And then we are going to talk with Dileep about his book. Hold on, I have it right here. The Pirate King's Daughter is Dileep's book. But first, let's talk about Grayshade with Gregory A. Wilson, the second Stormtalons book.
Sure. Well, Grayshade, the pitch line for Grayshade was, what if Jason Bourne were trained in 14th century Rome in the ways of sonic magic? And that's kind of the image that I sort of imagined for him.
Well, actually, I hear that question posed a lot, so I'm glad you answered it.
Yeah, it's sort of inspired by the two characters. One is Robert McCall, who is the Equalizer from the 80s TV show, not the Denzel Washington movie, which is great.
The TV show.
But yeah,
I love the Equalizer.
Yeah, really, really good stuff about this guy who ends up leaving an agency that he worked for many, many years and ends up leaving when he finds that it just hasn't sort of fit with his moral code. And then the other one, of course, is a little bit of the Jason Bourne thing, although that was a later influence. Grayshade is an elite assassin in what is called the Order of Argoth, which is a religious group that functions in a city called Corel. In Stormtalons, Corel is kind of a city-state. I almost imagined it sort of like as kind of Venice, essentially, and operates between the nations of Jalant and then Nornar. And the first book takes place entirely in that city. Grayshade has worked for this organization for a decade or more, following his superiors and killing in the name of his god, the just god Argoth, as he sees it.
Well, let me just so that I can get a better idea of how Stormtalons works as a shared universe. Was that just God already available from Ed and editorially, or did you kind of come up with that and say, hey, can I use this?
So I got lucky in the sense that I had come up with it early on, and it was really in the infancy of the Ed Greenwood group. And so Ed had approached me and said, and a few others, and said, we're thinking about doing this thing. And I pitched this idea to him, and he thought, oh, this is great. I'd love to be able to use this. But because Corel is, I don't want to spoil it, but you'll find out what the limitations of Argoth as a god are or are not. I'll just, I don't want to say any more than that. But the Corel is sort of self-contained in a way, at least Grayshade believes it to be. And so we got lucky in the sense that much of the book takes place within that city. And the sequel, that's a trilogy, so the second book, Renegade, he literally leaves Corel for reasons I won't get into.
Yeah, this is going to be a trilogy, correct?
Much of the rest of Nornar,
So this is going to be a trilogy, right? Your Grayshade is the first book in a trilogy set in Stormtalons, correct?
That's correct, called the Grey Assassin Trilogy. But there's a lot more about Nornar itself, and Tel Savar, which is the capital city of Nornar. There's a lot more of that happens in the next 2 books.
Okay.
So it's got political intrigue and religious faith and betrayal and doubt and as you know, a little bit of magic, as we've talked about. But I'm proud of it. You know, I worked a long time on the book, and it was extremely exciting to be a part of Ed's world, and it was a great honor to follow Ed up with the book, you know, of his new fantasy setting of Stormtalons to be the second book that's in that setting. So I'm excited with it. It seems to have gotten a good response so far.
Well, good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it. You know, I always try to read your stuff. And I'm still going to read the liminal space thing, your college professor level thing.
Liminal space in the car.
Yeah, I want to read that.
Good. That'll make 2 of you.
Yeah, no, I totally want to read that. Okay, so I want to, something you just mentioned begs a question for me, and I'd like to get Dileep's input and Kat's input on this as well. Every fantasy setting usually has deities of some sort, and those deities vary on how much power and influence they have in that setting. So Dileep and Kat, do y'all want to speak maybe to how the deities work within the Stormtalons universe? I mean, Dileep, does your book even touch on that? Obviously, you know, Gregory's book does.
Yeah, it might. I think in my book, the deities are more mentioned than our powers, than are used as powers. So the people operate and they'll call out or pray to their deity, but they don't. The deities themselves aren't characters or aren't influencers in the book in that sense.
So they don't throw anybody overboard because the crew can't abide a Jonah?
Well, people might throw, they might throw them overboard, but it's not the deity saying throw them overboard.
Okay.
It's more superstition, the way they follow it,
Gotcha.
more our history than anything else.
Right.
Because I purposely wanted to focus much more on the characters and try to use magic as a bit of a backdrop and a tool.
Yep. Okay. Well, so Kat, are the deities the source of magic, or is that known yet?
That is not known yet. How the deities are handled in Stormtalons is also different from how you might see it in other fantasy settings that have gods, and that there are only 6. And
okay.
It.
Okay.
And they don't interact with people. They're not characters. They're not going to send dreams, visions, or portents with themselves on the magnificent throne with the good backlighting saying, thou shalt go forth.
Right.
They'll send, metaphorical visions or perhaps grant them a token that has some sort of power in order to help them. But it's only these 6 gods, and they may have different names and they may be worshipped differently, but it's only these 6 gods.
Okay. So, that's cool to know because that can be very important to the tone of a setting. So that's interesting to know. Gregory, I want to talk to you, ask you maybe 1 or 2 questions more on your book, and then we're going to cut to a break, and when we get back, we'll wrap the show with talking to Dileep about his book. Now, and I want to ask this, I'm not implying anything here, I'm just curious, is there anything about your book, and I'm just saying because the timing of your book coming out, and obviously the Assassin's Creed movie is about to come out, so it's going to be on both people's minds. Is there anything in here? Are you an Assassin's Creed fan? Is there any homages, or is it just a very superficial, similarity between like kind of the religious assassin thing?
Yeah, I mean, I am. It's funny. I am an Assassin's Creed fan, but I started working on this book, quite frankly, before.
That's kind of the sense I got when you said you've been working on it for a while.
But, it's funny you mentioned that, though, because I'll just say very quickly that Brent Weeks, who wrote a series called The Way of Shadows, we had him on my podcast that I do called Speculate, and I was interviewing him, and when I was first thinking about Grayshade, he had just come out with this book, The Way of Shadows, and I start reading about this, a dark fantasy setting with a man in a city who is trained by it, and I was like, are you kidding me? And then I went and I got the book, and it turned out that after I did, it was a lot different, and he also goes in a much different direction. So when I had him on the Speculate, he started talking about how he had read this book by Brandon Sanderson called Warbreaker, and how Brandon Sanderson he was really freaked out that Brandon Sanderson had gotten to his idea first. And I said, Brent, I want to talk to you about a concept called karma, and about what this means. So he thought that was very funny.
That is funny.
Assassin's Creed was not that, but I did worry that it might show up.
Yeah, and like I said, I want to be very clear. I'm not implying that your book is Assassin's Creed. I just can't help because with your love of video games, I didn't know if maybe just on a very surface level you were giving a mild, shout out to Assassin's Creed. So
it's also a lot more. The biggest thing is that there's so much more intrigue that doesn't involve fancy outside conspiracies. You know, it's more kind of an internal thing as well. So,
all right.
Yeah.
Well, I got to get us to a break, and then we're going to talk to Dileep about his book, and then we will wrap because time goes so quick in radio. So real quick, some goblins are your friends. And I'm going to be over at Game Goblins this afternoon after the show running a play test for the new Star Trek Adventures RPG. But some goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer of Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. Conveniently located at 1121 South Bowman, right on the corner of Bowman and Canis in West Little Rock, and staffed by friendly employees, Game Goblins has expanded their store size, and there's plenty of room for exciting inventory and tables for play space. You'll like that space because Game Goblins has gaming events for every day of the week. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Also, first-time customers mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. That's Game Goblins. Tell them Shane Plays sent you.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
Megawars.net. The classic online space strategy game has returned, bigger and better than ever before. Scout the universe and claim your empire. Construct, customize, and launch dozens of different starships. Battle thousands of opponents online in a team-based competition leading to the ultimate Battle of the Galaxies. Grab your slot today for the only online game where tactics and strategy still reign supreme. Visit megawars.net and get options only available in our special pre-sales previews running now. Megawars.net.
The die is cast. Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions. Castles and Crusades is the original, easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or Trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.
Hey, welcome back to Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio. I am joined by some very cool guests. I've got Cat Jarrett, who is the lore guardian of the Stormtalons fantasy universe from Ed Greenwood, novels and games and other stuff. And I've got two authors in that universe. I've got Gregory A. Wilson, who is a return visitor to the show. And I've also got Dileep Rangan, who is one of the authors as well. We're about to talk to Dileep about his book. First, I want to give Kat a super quick chance to tell people, and I've got these linked on the show notes at shaneplays.com, but Kat, how can people find these books?
The easiest way to find them is to go to onderlibrum.com.
Okay.
And then once you're there, go to the Emporium. And that's ONDERLIBRUM.com.
Okay. Now, are
That's
there?
the easiest.
Oh, go ahead.
they're also on Amazon and iBooks and Kobo and all of those.
Okay, and I want to mention again, we've got 3 gift packs of Stormtalon books to give away electronically. So since the show also goes out as a podcast and is also delayed on Krypton Radio over the next week or so, people can tweet me at Shane Plays or email me at shane@shaneplays.com for a chance to win. Okay, Dileep has been very patient and has called in all the way from London. So I want to make sure to give him the rest of the show. We've got roughly 5 minutes for you to talk about this. Tell us about your book, Dileep.
Sure. Thanks, Shane. The book actually takes place in a more pirate-based part of the world, and it's really based in a Southeast Asian setting, in part because I thought in fantasy a lot of the stories take place in North European or European, kind of settings and worlds. Right. And so I really wanted to shift it to something that was a bit different, and also, I think, better played to the idea of piracy and shipping. So it made a lot more sense to me, and culturally it made a lot more sense to me.
Well, you know what a pirate's favorite state is, don't you, Dileep?
Yes.
You know, don't you?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, and so the advantage for me was I live in Singapore now, so it's kind of sort of that in Indonesia is a haven for piracy even today. So it seemed quite natural for me to write
so
in
you've
that
got
place
it's natural. Well, I mean, people don't realize in the real world today, like Captain Phillips, piracy is a real thing today. So you had some real world stuff to draw on there. So tell us a little bit about your protagonist. It's a woman pirate, correct?
Correct. So she's the captain of a privateer, daughter of the king of the island clan that runs one of the island clans that are running one of the major privateer enterprises, and she is unwittingly caught into the nefarious plans of a third party who's trying to gain power in the kingdom. So on an otherwise innocent bit of piracy, she ends up getting caught up in this grand scheme, and really it's about her journey of how she addresses that. So she's kind of drawn into this thing slowly throughout the book, and she does a little investigation, something goes wrong, she's drawn a little further in until she's too far in to get out and has to take some positive action to try to fight her way out, and realizes she has to do something to stop the scheme that's going along. And it's also a trilogy, so this is the first book in that story.
Okay, so that's one of the questions I was going to ask.
And the characters.
Okay, so this is going to be a trilogy. So now, are pirates in your book? Even though it's in the Stormtalons fantasy universe, are there any similarities to the pirates that people have in their mind? Is it sort of a swashbuckling kind of pirates, or is it a different kind of pirates? Or
yeah, more freebooters. I mean, I think there are more people who just like being free of the confines of much more structured government life. So the pirates, typically the privateers, typically are all from the island nations, which are off the coast from the mainland, and the two major kingdoms on the mainland are much more structured, countries with a structured aristocracy and rules. And so the privateers aren't bad or good. This is what they do.
It's what
this is how they make their living.
Okay.
So I think it's much more interesting for me. I don't have to make them bad or good. There are bad ones and good ones, like Kat said earlier.
Right.
There's more a way of life for them, and that freedom out at sea.
Well, it sounds really interesting. I got about 20 seconds to wrap the show here. I'm going to tell my bad joke. I have to, because it's what I do. Pirates' favorite state is Arkansas. I'm sorry, and I live in Arkansas, so I'm sorry. I had to do that. I had to make my producer sad.
I tried to skip over that earlier, right?
You tried. You tried your best, but I got to tell bad dad jokes. That's what my coworkers call them. Thanks to all three of you for being on. Everybody, we will catch you next time on Shane Plays Geek Talk Radio.
Settle down. Ahoy, mateys. I welcome ye to the 4th Annual National Pirates Convention. I be your moderator, Redbeard Pete. We'd first like to thank the good people of the Milwaukee Holiday Inn for the accommodations. Not our first choice, but there be no vacancy at our favorite hotel, the Ritz-Carlton. First order of business, picking a location for next year's convention. Any ideas? Arkansas! Maybe anyone else? Madagascar! Nice one.
Boston!
Boston, kind of an odd choice, sir.
Bear with me. We can drive there, and when we arrive, we can park the car in the Harvard yard!
Boston it is. All right.
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.